Well, nice to see you all, and thanks for joining us for the latest in the Deckhive Introduces webinar series, where we meet some of the creators of the different and fabulous card decks that we have in the Deckhive library. So my name is Martin. I'm one of the creators of Deckhive, and today I'm joined by Simon Phillips, aka the Change Man, who will be talking to us about the Motivate cards and how they can be used, how they were developed, and the story so far, and hopefully a story that will continue, Simon.
Absolutely. Nice to be here. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So where do we start then? What's the beginning of the origin story of Motivate cards, and maybe I guess part of your background, because that must be part of the whole origin story.
Yeah. So the starting point was not where it went initially. So the starting point was an idea of understanding that what's motivating and demotivating people in the current moment, if you like, is what influences how they're behaving. And so in my head, it was, well, we could use something like, I'd seen a set of cards that were talking about motivating factors. And I thought, well, we could use something like that to effectively then create an app that you could use instead of a staff survey. So that was the sort of the big image that I had in the initial phase. And then as we focused in and got focused on a set of cards, a tool that we could use in coaching conversations, I teamed up with my colleague Sue Wellman, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. And we started to put together a set of cards and a coaching process that enabled people to tap into what we called motivational gaps. And that's the gap between how I'd like things to be and how they actually are in real time. And so we then validated the cards with Professor Charlotte Rayner at the University of Portsmouth. And she's a UK expert in workforce well-being and also workplace bullying as well. So she has a real interest in motivational data, which apparently at that level doesn't exist. So she was really excited about the concept of getting some sort of digital product in place as well. And so we developed the cards, and then it took us quite a few years to get to the point where we had an app, which is called motivatecards.com, and people can sort the cards on there, and it generates a self-coaching report. And that self-coaching report then, you know, if you're in a team and you don't have a coach around you, you can work through it yourself. But there was always a piece missing in the process from my perspective. And so when one of my colleagues at the Changemaker Group, Astrid, recommended having a look at Deckhive, it's like, yeah, that's the piece. So, and right now, it's so difficult for coaches and coachees to get together. So Deckhive offers an opportunity for people to sit on the other end of a screen and work through a conversation that's facilitated by Motivate cards. And so that's why I'm excited, you know, to be here and launching this with you today.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll have a look in a second and walk through the deck and show people kind of what's there if they haven't seen it before and how it can be used in Deckhive. I'm kind of interested. It's kind of interesting to hear a bit about the people who've created the cards as well. So in terms of what else you do, so how does this fit alongside what you're all about and the sort of the mission that you have within your own work?
Yeah, so my background has always been in change. So I started with Anderson Consulting, and just about when it was becoming Accenture, I left to start some, or to pursue some business ideas I had at the time. And ever since then, I've been training and coaching and working with teams and organizations, helping them make change happen. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I settled on a mission, a personal mission, which was to develop 1 million change makers around the world. So people who are skilled and have the right mindset, if you like, to go out there and support others through the changes in their lives. So that was a personal mission of mine. Where the cards fit in is more from that organizational and team and individual coaching perspective. And so that was what got me started with it. My colleague Sue is an executive coach, former, and has worked all over the world with individuals, helping them through coaching conversations and supporting them in that way. And so the combination was nice in terms of getting the right card set and getting the right information together. And so that's a little bit about us in the context. Currently, I founded the Changemaker Group, which is a collaborative group, basically, of volunteers that decide they want to work together and help organizations and individuals with change, because it's an incredibly complex environment in which we're living. So our mission is to support leaders in changing organizations.
Fab. And so you're keeping a track of the number of people you're supporting so you can see how close you get to your 1 million target?
Well, do you know, that's always the first question. And the answer is, I think we're probably already over 1 million, because you never know, just by supporting one person, the impact that they can have and the ripples that create in the environment. So we do a lot through the group in terms of we're a profit for purpose organization. So all of our profits go into things like SmartUp, which is an online learning platform, which we give away free to people across the world. And we run sessions with charity execs, for example, which they wouldn't necessarily be able to afford or want to prioritize in terms of expense, but we like to do that sort of stuff. So we know that we're making an impact, but we also know there's a whole load more work to do, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's nice to have such a clear aim, though. I think it's kind of to have a vision of reaching so many people and making a difference, and to quantify it like that, I think that must be a motivating thing to do for you.
Gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, and so I guess another kind of obvious question: if you're so focused on change, does that mean that you thrive through change yourself? Is it something that you have always found an appealing thing to be around, or are you driven to help people because you find change difficult yourself?
Yeah, I think I've been described as a bit of a swan when it comes to change and turbulence and all that sort of stuff. So people perceive that everything's going great, and I like to perpetuate that, because it's how I actually do feel that actually change is something to be embraced and not necessarily feared. However, there are times when you're pedaling like mad underneath the water and trying to move forward. So I'm aware of the challenges that change brings. And I think, I mean, and I'm sure you recognize this too, Martin, that now more than ever, the world needs more change makers, people who can support people, because the sheer scale of multiple changes that are going on all at the same time means it's very difficult for people to cope. And so, you know, anything we can do to support them along the way is great.
Yeah, and psychology and mindset is huge around all of that, isn't it? Because the way you embrace or push against the changes around you are a key part about the impact it has on you and how you cope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll share my screen in a second and we can see some of the cards, but do you want to sort of talk us through the kind of underpinning model and how you kind of came to settle on the 4 dimensions within this model?
Yeah, so I'll try that in English. We looked at the field, if you like, and then scanned far and wide in terms of what are the things that the motivating factors, if you like, for people in their lives. And that meant a whole load of research and trying to dig into all of the latest texts. So for example, in the life cards, which is just one of the 4 categories, it's been influenced by things like Daniel Pink's Drive, which talks about some of the influencing factors or motivating factors in people's lives. And so having done all of that research, we then put them all on the table, if you like, and started to create some themes, and then landed on something that looked a bit like these 4 categories that everybody can see now, of relationships, environment, activities, and life. And looking at each of the factors, it was how does the 12 cards that are in each of these categories, thank you, you're showing them, how do individuals deal with those on a day-to-day basis, and what are they looking for? How would they like things to be? And that was where we started to, through the discussion, we started to land on a process for people to use the life card, the Motivate cards, in a way that enabled them to talk quite quickly about things that would otherwise maybe elude them in terms of language. And what I mean by that is there's 48 dimensions here. When you first sit down with most coaching clients, they can't always find the words to express how they're feeling about things. So having these cards and having the opportunity to play with them allows them to tune into things that might be real insights for them. So they hadn't thought of it that way, and they hadn't realized that. And especially with, if you did get people to rank order some of these things in terms of how they'd like things to be and how they are, you start to generate some really positive conversations. So we talk about them in the context of accelerating the conversation with individuals, just because of the span of topics, if you like, or elements that are covered in the 48 cards. So I can't remember whether this was accidental or whether we orchestrated it, but there's a nice acronym there of REAL. The app delivers results in real time, but equally, we feel that the 48 motivating factors, if you look at them just on the basis of how do you feel today, then that is also a real-time insight, as opposed to, and very deliberately as opposed to, the type of motivational tools that look at your drivers, because our motivational drivers in life are quite often compromised by the things that are going on in life right now. So I might be, I might have a motivational driver of wishing to serve, for example. But if right now I've got some economic pressures, or I've got some family pressures, or there's other things going on, that may actually in real time be lower on my list of things that are driving me on a day-to-day basis. And so the idea of this is it's meant to be a snapshot. It's absolutely meant to be something that we're talking about right here, right now, and it will change next time we talk. And so that's how we've, that's the thinking behind the cards and how we use them.
Yeah. So I guess then, do you find that the more people use them, the more comfortable they get with the process?
Yeah, absolutely. And the processes can change as well along the way. And certainly that's one of the amazing opportunities with Deckhive is I'm sure all the coaches that are going to use this will find their own favorite ways of utilizing the cards. And, we'll show them one or two ideas today, but this is an opportunity for people to put their own thoughts in place around what the process will be for their conversations. We've devised one, which is the app conversation, which is all about rank ordering. So that what it does is it takes all 12 cards in relationships, and you have to rank order them. Now, obviously, we could do this on Deckhive as well. But in terms of how the app works, you rank order them, first of all, by how you'd like things to be. And then on the next screen, you rank order them by how things are. And then you press, the magic button, and out comes information that shows you the gaps. And those gaps can be positive or negative. So if you've got a positive gap, it means you're getting more of something than you would like ideally right now. And if it's a negative gap, it means you're getting less of that than you would ideally like right now. So that's the coaching conversation that the original coaching conversation that we created, and that's what's generated in the coaching report. But what we want people to do now is take that coaching report, which with their three biggest gaps, and come onto Deckhive and have that conversation around those three gaps. But that's, as I say, that's just one coaching process. I think there's so many more that will emerge, which we would love people to share with us once they discover them, because then I can create a little video and put it up on the site and we can share it with the community. Yeah,
so one of the great things about card decks, I think, generally is that flexibility and the ability to be creative, and not just for the professional, like the coach or the facilitator, to have that ability to create their own activities, but also from the point of view of the client at the receiving end, that they have a sense of ownership, don't they? Because they're choosing cards very often, and they can, in physical form, they can hold on to them, and on the screen they can move them around and flip them over, and it does make it feel quite a different process in terms of where the ownership of the conversation lies, I think. It's one of the beauties of cards generally.
Yeah, and it's much more engaging. I totally understand that there are professional coaches that don't necessarily want to use tools all the time because they have a different process. It's just on a personal level, and I'm sure everybody in the Deckhive community just recognizes there's a different type of conversation that evolves once you introduce a little bit of a gaming element or a fun element. You're then into different conversations, which are great.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I forget, so the physical version of these cards, do they exist, and do people use them in that form yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the original product, was a physical pack, and we've even got a cardboard board, if you like, for people to lay them out. You don't necessarily need that, but the physical cards exist, and they can be purchased through the website. But they, I think one of the big things I think that's happened in the last year is the sheer volume of people that now want to do these things digitally. And of course, it opens up the world to coaches, because you're not going to be able to do a face-to-face with a physical set with somebody who lives in Africa if you're based in the UK. So this is, it's great to be involved with this.
Yeah, and it's absolutely, yeah, it does obviously, as you can see, reflect more closely the physical cards, in a sense. That's what we've tried to create with Deckhive, is a table, a space where you can put your cards, or you can move them around. And we won't really show you this side of it today so much, but the principle with Deckhive is that you can have many people in the same session. So we could theoretically invite everybody who's here today into this session to join us, and then everybody will be able to choose cards, move them around, flip them over, and which kind of creates that kind of dynamic environment. So if you need some support around the technical side of what Deckhive can do and how to do it, then we have a tutorial section on the website, which is a good place to start and to learn the mechanics of the process. So we're going to focus more today on the content of this particular deck. So do you want to give us a sense then of some of the ways in which we might go about starting an activity? If we've not done this before and we're a coach, what we would recommend would be a good way to kind of get a client to engage with the process?
Yeah, a lot of coaches will have used at some stage in their career the Wheel of Life to help get a conversation going around sort of the personal factors that someone's working through. And so the life cards are an updated version of that, because the Wheel of Life has 8 dimensions. There are 12 life cards. And if you want to click on table 5, Martin, we've got a couple that we pulled out earlier. So imagine that you're having a conversation with your coaching client. You've clicked on the life cards icon over on the left-hand side, and it brings up all of those, the 12 dimensions that we've pulled together for the complete life card set. And you would have a conversation which says, okay, which ones are catching your eye? Which ones do you feel? Well, again, this comes down to your coaching process. Is how would you like them to select cards, on what basis, what criteria you're asking them to select them. We've sort of quite randomly just picked out 3 here, and then you have them on the table for a conversation, and you can explore each of those. Each card has a mini descriptor alongside. So for example, healthy, my well-being needs are met. So that gives people a context for the specific card as well. And that can be a prompt for a conversation around their health, and how do they feel, and how are things going right now? What are the blockers to good health? What are the enablers to good health? What enhances your health on a day-to-day basis, and what can get in the way? So you can open up a coaching conversation with each card. Equally, you could say, so if you've pulled out those 3, is there any correlation between those 3? Is there a relationship between the 3 cards that you'd like to explore? So the lovely thing about it, just like the Wheel of Life in that sense, that you can get a sense of overall impact or overall state of play. You can, with the life cards too, you can organize them and you can talk about them. And then, as I saw you just demonstrating there, you can pull out these little sticky notes and capture some comments, add them alongside the various cards, and then screenshot that, and you've got an output, if you like, from that conversation, which you can take into the next conversation, or you can just have as reference for the whole coaching relationship. So I think that's a great introductory pathway, if you like, for any coach thinking about using Motivate cards, because everybody knows the roots and the origins and the likely process, if you like, of those conversations. So that's the more traditional route in. I think the other three sets of cards are important at different stages in our lives, and which we can talk about as we get into them. But one of our clients that uses Motivate cards runs a recruitment business, and they use the cards to help individuals understand what motivating and demotivating them right now as they're between jobs. Why are they between jobs? What's going on for them in their lives that they want to, consider a new way of doing things? And obviously, with things like the Great Resignation going on right now, there's a real opportunity here for coaches to pick up on those conversations with individuals who are finding themselves at crossroads and trying to work out what they're going to do with their lives. And so when you think about relationships, environment, and activities, we tend to think about those in a workplace environment. So what type of relationships do you thrive on? Which types of environment do you love to work in? And what are the types of activities that you love to do? Once you know those three things and maybe attach them to some of your life goals that you've talked through with the life cards, you're in a very strong place then, as in terms of the coaching relationship, to be able to explore that and drill down and help the individual that you're working with to see new ideas, things they hadn't even considered before. And that's what starts to come out when we look at the other three categories of cards.
That's a really good summary. So what should we say about these other tables? I know you had something else to say about using this in a sort of team kind of activity. How would that work?
Yeah, so imagine that you're working with a team that within an organization that has an ambition to be more agile and more innovative. You could create an exercise whereby you first introduce the concept to the teams and get them to agree what those terms mean and have a common understanding. And then you can send them off with the Deckhive functionality to 3 different tables. You split them up into 3 and they go off to 3 different tables. And those tables could be relationships, environment, and activities. And they look at the 12 cards that are available and they might think about, so what is it? What are the dimensions under the term relationships that have an impact when it comes to being an agile or an innovative workplace? And so the 3 that we've picked out here are trusting and collaborative. Obviously, they're going to enable innovation, but controlling relationships might actually kill innovation and really hinder it and be a real blocker. And so teams could pull those out and start talking about them and start to think about, so what do we need to do differently? And I think that's where you potentially take them with a sort of facilitated conversation. So those are the 3 that we've pulled out for relationships. If you have a look at table 3, we pulled out 3 for environment. So again, a diverse and a fun environment is going to be an enabler of innovation, whereas a safe environment, whilst on one level you might think, okay, that's maybe a foundation on which we can build. Equally, if there's a real focus on safety, then that might be a real inhibitor to more open-minded thinking. So again, it's wherever the team takes that conversation and what are they pulling out and what are they focusing on. And then finally, table 4 We've got activities, again, creative activities, stimulating activities, really going to help in an agile environment. Whereas results focused might be too closed. It might be, actually, we can't always focus on results, because then we're not going to learn well enough along the way in terms of what makes a difference at various stages. So it can't always be about results, because in a truly innovative environment, you want a reasonable level of failure along the way, so you've got something to learn from. And so, again, where does the team want to take that conversation? Now, the nice thing is, if we were to go back to table 1 and have a conversation with the group about, okay, so what have you found out so far? We can then, as a group, go and revisit tables 2, 3, and 4 as an overall group, and hear some presentations, hear some thoughts, and then maybe come back to table 1 to debrief. And the thought that came to mind was an activity that was maybe start, stop, continue activities. What are we going to start doing as a team? What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to continue doing to create a more agile and innovative culture? And so you've got the space here. That's what's lovely about the design here, Martin. And huge thumbs up to you and the team for creating such an amazing space, because you've got the space there, and you can have dynamic conversations where you can dip in and out of the other tables with everybody involved and engaged in the conversations. I think it's a fantastic team tool, actually.
Yeah, it takes on a different sort of dynamic then, doesn't it? And it's interesting kind of hearing you talk about that example, because then of course you're thinking more future oriented, aren't you? And not about where the individual's at right now at all. But it's about, well, I can see it will come round to where are you as an individual right now, and how do we move from where we are to the aspirational collective goal. But you could start with any number of different questions, couldn't you, for discussion? And then I can see how this kind of structure just helps to stimulate insights in relation to that particular question that's important at the moment to work through. So I could see this being a really useful tool in many different places.
And inside organizations as well, if we think about how might this work with the bigger sort of digital app, where we can actually get organizational data. If enough people in an organization are sorting their cards, we can get organizational data. We can then drill down into the teams where we're seeing some of the biggest gaps, and literally set up a session like this on Deckhive and start exploring that in a very open way, and just say, okay, so these are some of the gaps that are coming up in this team. Let's talk about it. And it can be as open as that. You don't have to always have to, overthink it. And the flexibility, because I know you can just click on a number and delete a whole table if you wish. You can just move the conversation on so quickly, which is what you would want to do in a live face-to-face environment. Well, you've totally replicated that here.
Yeah, fab. Well, I'm glad you can see lots of potential. I mean, were there other particular exercises you wanted to highlight now, or do you think that that's kind of as far as you want to go in sharing those? Because I know, as you said at the start, people will have their own ideas as well to bring to the party.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think those 3 activities. One is come with an understanding of what some gaps are or what some challenges are. Throw them up on the screen. Use the functionality to have a conversation. That's a great starting point. Equally, one-to-one coaching conversations like the life cards that we looked at. That's a good soft landing, if you like, into Motivate cards. And then as you build it up with teams, you can do more of that. However, as I did say, that if this was a coaching conversation with somebody who's between jobs or feeling a little bit unmotivated at work, quite often, because there are 12 dimensions to each of these areas, each of these categories, something pops up. And that's usually an insight. So an example for you, I was doing this, I was using the physical pack with a manager in a banking organization. And for him, personal health was, in his head, was a real top priority. But as he sorted the life cards and started looking at all the different dimensions, it became very evident that right now, back to that concept I told you about real time, the snapshot was there were a whole load of other things inside the life cards which were a priority right now. And so health had fallen to 11 out of 12 for that individual. And that was a real insight for them, because the thought process it triggered for them was, my life's out of balance at the moment. It's not how I'd like it to be, because his thought process, I'd liked it to be healthy, and probably felt that it was healthy enough. You know, the way we sometimes fool ourselves when we're just coping with a whole load of things. And it was only when they started to look at what was being prioritized, they realized this is not what I want. And it led to a whole career change for that individual, to go off in totally different field of work. Actually, they went off to be an actor.
Wow.
So they just felt that was meeting all of their other dimensions of what motivated them. And then that aligned with some of the driving motivating forces, if you like. So they wanted to create a bit of an alignment between life on an everyday basis and how my perfect life looks.
Wow. That's a nice example. Thank you. So I want to give everybody a chance to ask any questions that they have. So while you're thinking through what those questions might be, feel free to add them into the chat if you want to do it like that, or in a moment you can unmute and ask in the old-fashioned way. But just while you're having a think about that, let me just share a couple of other points more widely about Deckhive, so you can sort of get a sense of that for those of you who haven't already seen. I'm just going to leave this session for a moment, and I can show you the library. So we can see the other decks that we have in the library already. But before I do that, I'll just show you the dashboard here, because you can see this session that we were just in has been saved. So if we were doing that in anger, as it were, with a real client, we could then come back to continue that session maybe next month, next week, whenever it might be, and simply reactivate that session and continue the discussion with them. If we wanted to not reactivate it and just have a snapshot, equally, we can go into that session and see kind of how things looked. As Simon says previously, the little camera icon in the session allows you to take a screenshot of all the content that's on a table as well. So that's a very quick and easy way for anybody to take a snapshot of the session that they've been in. So it's really easy to go back and revisit things, which of course is really a key benefit of a digital version of this kind of thing. You don't have to leave a real table laid out in exactly the same format from one month to the next. And in the library, we have a number of different decks growing all the time. In fact, we just had another one added this morning, which is the Your Life Story one. We have the emotional health cards, which are a lovely set, particularly for use with younger people. We have various different strengths cards, motivate cards, so you'll see them there in the library. Some around emotions, some around appreciative inquiry, some around creativity. So a few different decks, and growing all the time. So if you know of any decks that are really valuable to you, that you really enjoy using in your work, then please let us know, because if we don't already know the creators of those decks, then we can go looking for them and see whether that we can tempt them to add their content to Deckhive as well. And I mentioned before the support link. So at the bottom in the blue menu, you'll see the support link. In there is where you'll find the tutorials for how to do the basics within a session. So that's a really good place to start if you want to just learn the ropes with how to use Deckhive. But nothing really substitutes for just having a go with it. So I'd encourage you to do that and practice with friends and family, because that really is the best way to kind of get comfortable with how it all works. So it is pretty simple, but the more you practice, the easier it does get, I have to say. Well, let me stop my screen share there for a moment. So are there any questions from anybody that's here? And yeah, any thoughts about either about Deckhive or about particularly about the Motivate cards? Jackie.
So I put it in the chat, but I might as well just.
Oh, sorry. It would help if I open the chat, wouldn't it? I can't see the questions if I don't have it open.
It's like, how often would you suggest going through each of those Motivate cards categories to assess how you're progressing? Is there too many times? Is there, would you suggest it was set yourself a regular pace to run through them, or sit back and give it a bit longer so you can kind of, the changes can embed better?
So I'm going to give you my favorite answer now, which is it depends, because it depends where you're starting. If you're starting at a place where there aren't big gaps between how you'd like things to be and how things are, then there's not much of a journey to go on if you're happy in that space. If there are big gaps, and through the coaching conversations you're working on some of those, and you're starting to, you might want to assess every, relatively frequently, every couple of months maybe, or, it depends on the coaching cycle and the way that the coach is working with you as an individual, how often you might want to repeat. But because it is in the now, you can repeat it relatively often without any fear of, coming up with dud results, because however you perceive things today is your reality. And so even though you might have seen it one way last conversation, today you might have a different insight or a different thought around that particular dimension. So we found that we can use them at a pace that suits the individual, really.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
I have a question. I'm not sure whether my question's for Martin or Simon, because it was a technical question or whatever.
It depends how hard it is, to be honest.
But I was interested in Simon's expression he used right at the beginning, which is about motivational gaps. And I think that's an enticing thing for a coach. So I'm not quite sure in this how one compares the as is with the as would like to be. Is it purely through the snapshot, or how do we do that comparison process?
Yeah, so this, it can be done on Deckhive. It would be a case of, ordering the 12 dimensions of one category and taking a snapshot, or not even, just having that laid out as table 1, and table 2, how they are in reality. And then you can start to visually get a sense of which ones are out of sync. And that might be fine. I mean, that's a step up on just the physical cards, because the physical cards, you can't see both sets laid out at the same time. So you're constantly having to make notes of what number they are in the order. Equally, the Motivate Cards app is a place where you can do the sorting and get the gap analysis done for you automatically, and then you can bring your results to Deckhive to explore in a coaching conversation. So it's one of two ways of doing it. But as we talked about in the introduction, really, that's just one coaching construct. It could be that you've got your own favorite ways of thinking about the 48 dimensions that are in there, and you come up with a different way that you want to explore them with your clients. So you have the options, and you also have the option of just literally creating your own process here.
Yeah, and as well, you don't have to necessarily have a different table. If it's easier for you to be able to see things side by side, then one of the options you can do is to get somebody to order the cards, in one area of a table, however they might want to do that. And then simply, if you click on the table itself and drag, then I tend to describe this as kind of changing your view of the table. You're just kind of dragging your sort of window of the table, if you see what I mean. So you can drag all the content in that sense away, so it's even not visible, and then they can go through the process again and do it, in this space here. And then once they've done that, then it's very easy then to be able to kind of just drag back again, so you can see both at the same time, or to be able to zoom in or zoom out to get a different view.
Yeah,
so
function's really great, because as long as once you've used the cards a couple of times, no matter how bad your eyesight is, you should be able to recognize them roughly as being a certain card, but irrelevant, or irrespective of the zoom that you've done. So you can get that side-by-side view. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and it's a nice thing about this design that you've created, Simon, is it's very clear. I think it works very nicely in that regard.
I just want to give a shout out to my my stepdaughter, Jazzy Olive is her business name, because she created all of these a few years ago, and they just work beautifully.
Yeah, I think there's no point over designing. I think you get a lot of products which are kind of, they look very pretty, but they're not so practical for the purpose. And this looks like this is very well designed for the user. It looks nice as well, and it's probably not going to age too badly, as it is. That kind of design, I think, will hopefully last you for a good few years to come.
Yeah.
So was that okay, Nikki? Does that kind of give you what you're after?
No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from anybody else? Don't worry if there's not.
I'm just wondering on one thing. With using these in anger, if you like, with a client, I'd want to be really confident with how the system will work. So is there a practice mode?
Yes, there is, kind of. There's a couple of ways to answer that. The first is that we have a demo deck, which is, it just kind of doesn't have any content. There's a particularly of interest, just a few words and a few pictures. And you can go into that and start a session with that from the main Deckhive site. So that's one way to kind of have a play. The other is that we have a free plan, which allows you to have up to 5 activated sessions a month, but only with the starter decks. So there are currently 6 starter decks, including the demo deck. So that's another way to kind of, have a no risk kind of a way to play with the functionality. But of course, that's a bit different than playing with the content that you really want to be using. So the third kind of part of it, which could be useful then, is that we have usually some offers around that give you a chance to have a free period to play with one of our paid plans. And so we will have a code we will be able to share in the notes for this video, and I'll circulate it to those of you who are here live today as well, which will give you a month free, and then you can, if you time that right, so that you have an opportunity then to make sure you practice, then you'll be able to use all of the content in the library and beyond the unlimited plan. And the unlimited plans are the one you really want at the start, because then it means you're not limited to the number of sessions you do, and you can kind of rope everybody and anybody in to play with you, and get it sort of honed down. So combination of doing those things and watching the tutorials to pick up some tips, I think is the best way.
Okay, great, thank you.
Pleasure. Oh, anything else? Feel free to ask if anything else comes up to mind. Otherwise, we're probably a good point to wrap up. But is there anything else, Simon, that's come to mind for you that you wanted to mention that you haven't?
Only that, if anybody wants to ask any more questions about the Motivate cards themselves, just by all means just reach out and give me a shout, and I'm happy to answer any questions people may have that are watching this later, and they have a question, if you like, but they weren't able to be here today. Very happy to answer about the Motivate cards. I'm going to send them your way if they've got technical questions.
And if they're too technical, I'll send them to Doug as well, who's our developer. So they usually find their way to him. Fab. Well, firstly, thank you, Simon, for being here today and for having your deck in our library. It's fantastic to have them there. I think they add a lot of value, and I think they'll be really popular. So it's really good to see you talking it through about some of the ways in which you used them before. I think that will really help to provide some inspiration. Thank you to everyone who's been here today and joined us live or watching the recording. I would just point out that we have a number of other recordings for these kind of sessions that we've done with the other decks in the library. So if you think you'd be keen to find out a bit more about some of those other decks, then do have a look out for those. You'll find them through our website at the bottom. Again, there's a link to the webinars, or they'll be on our Eventbrite page, or even on our YouTube channel. So Eventbrite page for the upcoming ones. We have some future sessions scheduled, including tutorials, and there'll be more Deckhive introduces sessions with new decks in the new year. But the recorded previous sessions will all be up on our YouTube channel, so you'll find them there. And this one will hopefully be there by this time tomorrow. So yeah, thanks all of you. I hope that you find it useful as a tool. Likewise, same as Simon wants feedback on using the cards, we'd love to have feedback on using Deckhive. So we'd love to know if it's working well for you, and if there are any niggles or any kind of wishes that if it could just do this differently or better, then that would be really helpful. Then we would really love to know those things, because we can't continue to improve and develop if we don't know what you need. So do keep in touch. And if you have any questions along the way, then do shout. But yeah, thanks again for joining us, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.